and public policy. It was a joint major. Government and public policy, which is political science. I studied at the Franklin and Marshall University in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in the US. And throughout my study, I saw my experience in the US. I spent 5 years there. And during my experience, especially when it comes to the Palestinian issue, always see, and this also was reinforced, it was emphasized through my work at We Are Not Numbers. Whenever Palestine, the Palestinian topic comes on the news, it is usually one-sided, or it is usually hard facts, meaning just news. Number of people died, number of people injured, number of rockets flew to Israel, number of airstrikes in Gaza, all this kind of stuff. So the human face was missing from the news that they get, because we will be talking today about feature news. Before we start to talk about feature news, we will be talking about hardline news or harder news, which is basically the news that we see every day, basically. And what happens when the human face is missing? You don't really feel the story. See what I mean? Like when you say, well, 50 people died. Well, let me give you an example. Let's say an earthquake hit China, for example, or Japan. Okay, and you read it on the news. How do you feel? Yeah, you be like, okay, too bad, sucks for them, right? And you're like, okay, I feel sorry, but God's will, right? You don't feel nothing. You don't feel the human connection between you and the Chinese man or the Japanese man who's affected by the earthquake, right? But when you read a story about a boy, for example, a little boy who was running away from the earthquake, and then he grabbed his little sister, and then he ran away to a rescue boat, and then a helicopter came and rescued him, right? It's just a personal story, a story of a one person affected by the earthquake. It's a different story now, totally different. Now you feel like you're that little boy when you read. You feel like you're that little boy who's running away from the earthquake and grabbing his little sister and being rescued by the helicopter. It's different, totally different. Although they both hit the same topic, but they tell us totally different stories, and our reaction to them is totally different. So that was our mission when it was with We Are Not Numbers, is to actually promote this type of stories, the stories of people, personal stories, your own story, because we want to create this human connection between us and the people abroad. Because an American guy who's reading, or a girl who's reading a story about, I want to move this so I can move around. An American person or a European person who's reading a story about Palestinians, right? Why should he care? Right? It's just, he's so far away, it's a totally different continent. Why should I care? That's the first question they ask you. But then if you're reading, if you're reading a story about a person who's affected by the occupation, who's affected by Israeli policies and all this stuff, personal stories, how does it affect you as a person? It's a different story. Because they feel like they're reading a novel. They feel like they're, well, it's not a novel, but it's not a fictional novel, it's a real novel. But people, when they read novels, especially people who read, they feel the characters. And a lot of times they feel sad when the character dies, right? This is the same thing, but except it's real life, not a novel. So let's start with news stories and see what are the features of news stories. What makes a news story a news story? We will see some examples, and then we will move on to feature stories, and we'll see also some examples at the same time. Is it clear? Can everybody see it? Should we make it bigger? Should we make it bigger? Okay, let's try. What is the purpose of news stories? When we think of news stories, usually they are written, but to make it closer to our understanding, when we think of news stories, we usually think of, what's his name, the guy in Al Jazeera, who usually just talks about the Palestinian issue. A reporter from Al Jazeera. Or Umari, whatever is the name, right? They're just standing there, and what are they saying? 5 people died, an airstrike hit Gaza, The Israelis are escalating their attacks. Facts, facts, facts. All information, facts. It's very similar. It's very similar when it comes to writing. Most of the news is all is facts. So the purpose of news is to deliver information, to give you information. What information? The facts on the ground. What is happening right now. So usually the news are all about covering what is happening at the moment. So they are very specific. They cover everything that is happening at the moment. If you are a reporter, let's say you're working for Al Jazeera, and then an airstrike hit some place in Gaza, right? And you did not cover that story. You wrote it the next day. Can you still publish it? Can you? No, because people read this story somewhere else now, by now. They heard it from Al Arabiya or from Electronic Intifada or some other source. If you did not do it first, it doesn't really count. It's not as powerful as it should be. So it has to be timely when it comes to news stories. We will compare this to feature stories. News stories also are very concise, specific. They provide a summary. They don't give you details. They provide a summary of the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. These are the 5 questions that usually we ask when we read a story. For example, who is affected? Who is affected by this airstrike? What? What is happening first? I mean, what is the first question actually? What is happening? Well, it's an airstrike. Who? Who is affected? Some family in northern Gaza, for example. Okay, where? Northern Gaza. When? It happened this morning, right? And why? Maybe it's a retaliation attack or whatever, right? So these questions have to be answered. But when it comes to news stories, they are very concise. They give it to you really quickly, okay? We talked about how the delivery doesn't happen. Also, when you are reading a news story, once you read it, the first couple of lines, or let's say 2 paragraphs, and then you stop reading, do you feel like you understood what was the point of this news story? Do you feel like you got the whole idea, usually? If you are reading a news story. Right, yeah. If you are reading Al Jazeera, usually we don't actually finish the articles. Most of the time. Because the title says a number of people injured, and then they give you the information at the beginning, and then you're like, okay, I'm done, خلاص, I'll go find something else to do. Because the people who write news stories realize this. That's why they created something called the inverted pyramid format. We'll talk about it in a bit. Let's talk about examples. This is an article from the New York Times. The title is Hurricane Matthews, Toll Rises. So they're talking about the deaths from the hurricane that is hitting Florida. Okay? Flooding hit North Carolina, and now it's affecting North Carolina. This is news. This is from today. This is the introductory paragraphs. Can I have someone read it if you can see it? I can see. And yeah, go ahead. Strong sight.
Mr. McCrory said Tuesday that an
enormous swap. I know. Sorry. Should have picked this girl.
Mr. McCrory said Tuesday that an enormous swath of North Carolina was in turmoil. Certain parts of the state were going through recovery at this point in time. Mr. McCrory said certain parts of the state were still going through ongoing floods, and now we have other parts of the state that are about to deal with some very serious circumstances, especially along 2 of our major rivers. Mr. McCrory said that state officials were especially worried about residents in and near Goldsboro, Greenville, and Rocky Mount, where flooding was expected throughout the week, and with North Carolina's fatality count rising, often because of vehicles that become submerged. Mr. McCrory pleaded with residents to avoid driving through flooded areas.
Do you feel like you got the whole idea by reading this? Do you need to read the rest of the article?
No.
I got it. The title was North Carolina is affected by the hurricane, and they're telling me everything I need to know. But the article was long, actually. I mean, it was like 11, 12 paragraphs. But by reading the first three, you just got the whole idea. And this is special. This is one of the characteristics of news articles. Just look. Can we answer the 5 questions just by reading the first 3 paragraphs? Who is affected? Well, first, what? What is going on? A hurricane. Who is affected? People of North Carolina. When did it happen?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Gives you the date. First sentence. They didn't answer the why because it's been going on for a while. And where we got to North Carolina. But you get the idea. And this is part of the inverted pyramid. We'll talk about it in a second. Let's look at another example. But you see, it's all about facts, right? Yeah. Did they give us a story of someone who's affected by the North Carolina hurricane or whatever? No examples, just facts, right? It hit North Carolina. It hit hard. There's a turmoil. Some parts are going through recovery. People are worried. The authorities, the government is worried about the people in the residence, etc. It's all about facts. This is another example. This is from Fox News from 2013. A large blast hit Afghan capital Kabul amid security transition with NATO. So this is about some tension in Afghanistan, in Kabul, in the capital. Okay? This is the introductory sentence. Afghan forces have taken over the lead from the NATO, from the US-led NATO coalition for security nationwide. So he's talking about the forces taking over the control of the security in Afghanistan. Okay. President Hamid Karzai announced on Tuesday. So they're telling us the when and what is happening. Okay. The announcement came amid a grim reminder of Afghanistan's daily violence. There's a lot of violence going on, and there's a bomb that hit someone who's very famous. So basically, they told us what they need to do. What they need to tell us in the first introductory sentences. Let's skip these parts. Let's go ahead with the inverted pyramid. This is the news. The first thing they give you is the lead, the most important parts of the article. So that's how they put it in order. This is the most important. This is important. This is the least important. As we saw in the first 2 articles, they want to tell you everything, the most important, what is going on. They want to establish the theme, the what and the why and the who, all these questions. They put it in the first couple of paragraphs, maybe the first or the second paragraph. Then the body of the paragraph, they tell you more information about it, and they're still important if you want to know a little bit more. But the ending is the least important. This is like, if you're talking about, if you're talking about ISIS, for example, hitting some city in Iraq, and then at the end you would say, and they also hit some cities in Libya and Egypt and stuff like that. It's related, but it's not very important. It's just additional information. But that is not what we do when we talk about feature stories. I give you this because I want to compare it to it. You have 2 papers in front of you. The first one, let's pull out the Ramadan one. A day on Ramadan or something like that, timetable.
1 day.
Yeah, 1 day in Ramadan. Let's read it. Take a couple of minutes to read it. Let's read it. And then let's compare how it's... Think about how it is different from a news article. And try to answer these questions as you read. Okay. So let's start with the first question. What did you notice about the introduction? And compare it to how you saw the news articles were. So compared to the news articles you did, what is the difference?
This one is full of details.
There's a lot of details.
It's not the most important.
Yeah, it's not the most important thing. It's just something. It's just something to start the article with.
It's more moderate than
It's more moderate. Okay, sure.
Many extra information are added.
Right. There's a lot of details. Unlike the news articles. Very true.
You have like the motivation to complete, to see what's gonna be
Right.
in the next.
So if you read the first 2 paragraphs and then you stop, do you still know what is the story about? No. It's totally different. Very true. Thank you, Hen.
it is rhetoric language at the same time.
It's what?
Rhetoric language.
Yeah, there's a lot of, yeah, it's like a story, it's like a story you're reading
Storytelling or
in a novel or something. Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's one of the characteristics of feature articles is that they say it's a story. You're telling a story. So it's very true, it's very true. The first thing she said, and also let's look at the order of information. Was there something important and then very important, then less important, then less important?
No.
What was the order she went with? It's not about them. Exactly. Time sequence. She went chronologically.
3 a.m. until
Exactly. She went from 3 a.m. in the morning when they wake up to catch some birds, turkeys, until at night when they eat aftar. So it's a different order. So it's not the order of importance, it's the order of time. What about the information she gave us? Was it like hard facts? Someone died, so whatever, this number, that number. Different. Personal information. What kind of information? Was it just information about Anas or more specific? Because personal information could be any information.
Information humanize the character.
It does. That's very true. It does humanize the character. It puts the spotlight on this aspect of this person or Anas.
I guess she gave mere information. For example, when she mentioned that the youth unemployment rate more than 50%,
Right.
It put it in a context.
Exactly.
You see, she didn't just give you the information and that's it. No, it put it in a context.
Exactly.
And this is why it was so effective in a way or another.
Excellent point. It does give you hard facts, but they are not they're not the most important part. They're just supplementary. They put them there to support whatever you're saying.
She's
Right.
showing the unemployment.
Exactly.
Yeah, not just saying.
To put it in a larger context, basically. So Pam could have told us also about how does Anas do in school, or how does he do when he's looking for a job other than catching turkey, or is Anas a political activist or not? Does he do anything political? Or what does Anas do when he hangs out with his friends? There's a lot of personal information she could have gave us, but she didn't. Why? Since it's personal, it's not general information, it's personal information. It's about one person, it's not about the general public. A very important part of the feature story, or aspects of feature story, is that the story has to be very, very focused, very specific. You need to pick one part in one story and talk about it. Because this story is not just about Anas, it's just about one day in Anas' life. It's not about Anas in general, right? It's not about the life of Anas. What does he do in school? What does he do for work? What does he do when he hangs out? What does he do when he's home? It's about one day in Anas, and this one day is not even a particular day, a regular day, it's a day in Ramadan. What does he do in one day in Ramadan? Very specific. A lot of times when we start to write stories, we get lost. So many details, so many topics, because we don't specify. We don't focus on one part. Especially when we talk about Palestine, right? When people talk about Palestine, they think, I want to talk about Palestine since the beginning of time, right? Our ancestors are the Canaanites, right? The Canaanean. And then they go on, and then we became Muslim when Omar Mukhtar came here, whatever. You know, the Muslims came to Jerusalem. And then they go into Zionism, all right? Then Zionism came to Palestine, and then we were all united, Muslims, Jews, and Christians, and then Zionism destroyed us. Then they talk about World War I and how we lost, the Ottoman lost, and then the British came, and then they talk about World War II, and then the Nakba, right? There's so many details, so many topics, but that doesn't tell me anything about you. And it makes the story so unfocused, so franchised. It's very distracting. It's scattered, right? So many details. Why should I care about all this stuff? Okay, so the British came here. Why are you telling me this? Why does it matter? How did it affect you? I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in how did it affect you. I'm not interested that the British came. Or the Nakba. If you talk about the Nakba, you can tell me about the stories of the Nakba and how we were kicked out of our homes and our grandfathers or maybe your fathers came to refugee camps. This is all important stories, but how is this related to you? Right? It's much better when it's focused on one person. If you're talking about Palestine and then you choose the Nakba, for example, tell me about, there's still many topics about the Nakba. You can talk about the history of the Nakba, but then you can talk about your grandparents who came to Palestine and the trip they took from the Nakba, for example. Or you can talk about the effects of the Nakba on your grandparents right now and how they wish to come back. Or you can talk about how it affects you, how your grandparents' stories affected you. Totally different, many options. So keep it focused. Let's go into the second example. Or do you want to take a break first? What do you think? Because it will not take very long. And I think I might be done by 2:30. Yeah. So if you want to take a break now, and then we can do the reading after the break, and then we can talk more. Okay? Because today we are only talking about the characteristics of the feature articles, and then we will start actually working. Actually, I will give you some homework to do to prepare for next class, and that's when we are going to engage in the process of writing. Okay? So let's take a break for 15 minutes. Is good? 15 minutes, and then we should be done by just to speed things up. It's very important to read the last page because I will be talking about this, and then the first page because it introduces the topic. If you want to read the second page, that's fine. But if you want to skip it, I don't. It's the same. It's fine. This is the story about the guy who was climbing a tower next to Al-Azhar. If you remember, with this video. This is the story about him. What is the first thing you notice? What is the first thing you notice in this article? Let's talk about the topic. What is the topic? Suicide. So is it about a person or about something else? It's about an issue. Exactly. It's about an issue. It's not about one particular person. It's about an issue. That's why we see throughout the article, we hear about the story of Abu Sitta. We hear about the story of the dream and Arafat. We had 3 stories in this article, right? So a feature article you could talk about either one person or multiple people covering an issue. Okay, but again, is it focused or general? Focused. Very focused. You're not talking about Gaza. You're talking about suicide in Gaza. One issue, one little issue in Gaza Strip. Very focused, right? The order for information, what did you see in this order of information? What was the order? This is not about time this time. So it's a different order. Was this about importance? No, it wasn't about the importance. Could be sequence of incidents. So it doesn't matter, the order is not very specific. It could be chronologically, you can write this happened first and this is second, this is third, or you could change it the way you see fit. I like the setup she did. First she told me the story of Abu Sitta in order to grab me to the topic. She didn't give me general information. She didn't give me hard facts. Immediately she went on with the story. Immediately. After Abu Sitta's story, what do you notice? Immediately after the story, she went on with what? Facts. Exactly. Now she put the whole story into context. Now to back up the story of Abu Sitta, because this is not just Abu Sitta's story, what did she do?
She got 2 other people.
2 other people. She wrote 2 more people. 2 other stories. Now you notice in this story, unlike the first one, unlike One Day in Ramadan, it has many what? Many quotes. It has many quotes from different people. From Abu Sitta, who didn't die, then from the ministry, from the mental health institute, or from the Euromed for human rights, then from Yunus's mother, Ibrahim's mother, and then Arafat's brother or father, right? Multiple people. So in many instances, when you write a feature article, you have to conduct interviews. You have to talk to people.
We have more than 1 people.
It could be, yeah, sure. It could be. So did you feel like, when you were reading it, did you feel like stopping?
No.
You actually wanted to continue reading, right? It's very different.
It evokes our feelings.
Yeah, you felt it.
Yeah.
So like you felt bad for the guy who wanted to kill himself because he has no money. And you felt it more so because everybody here in Gaza suffers from the same issue. The lack of jobs and opportunities and employment. And if someone from abroad who would read this story, would he also feel the same way? Would he feel sympathetic towards the people in the story?
Yes.
Why would he do so?
Because it's an attack. It tries to evoke the.
Correct, but what else? It does. Through the wordings and stuff, but why? Why would he feel sympathy for the guy?
Because they realize between the text that he has 7 children.
Okay.
And he had his salary cut for no real reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that
So how is this related to an American guy, for example?
he doesn't really face the same thing. He doesn't he's allowed to travel whenever he wants. He's
Could be.
He's allowed to leave his country.
Right,
he's allowed
right.
to look for a job.
Mhm. Okay, well,
It's way different.
it does. There are a lot of differences between the lives of Palestinians and the lives of Americans, but at the same time there are a lot of similarities in the core issues. And when you say he has children, maybe someone with children might sympathize. He's talking about his child, or the mother when she's talking about Eunice, right? A mother of a child who suffers from mental depression, maybe depression or died from suicide, she'll feel the same way, even if the reasons are different. A person who lost his job in the U.S. or the situation right now in a lot of parts of the world is very dire. It's very difficult economically. So a person in the U.S. who suffers from economic difficulties might also sympathize with the people in this story. So we try to touch what? We try to touch the similarities. Again, we talked about the human connection. This is the human connection again we're creating by talking about the things that similar that we might suffer from in some circumstances. Just about a week ago, I wrote a story about the similarities between the black struggle and the Palestinian struggle. You all hear the news about African Americans who go in protest in the street to against the government's policies or the policing policies, where they shoot black Americans who are unarmed. And then they get away with it, no punishment a lot of times, because the police is the judge and is the executioner at the same time. The police, you shoot, and then the police investigates themselves, and then the police says, okay, you're free, you did nothing wrong. What does this remind us of? Occupation, right? Occupation. Someone, me, and a Palestinian, we're Palestinians, we have nothing to do with America, but when we read this story, when we read the stories of Michael Brown or the other black Americans who were shot and killed, you feel the same way because you're like, I suffer from this too, right? The occupation does this. You shoot people, they investigate themselves, and then okay, you're free. You did nothing wrong. Same thing. So that's it. They were successful in creating this human connection, and we were successful in receiving it. And what I did last week, I wrote an article about this, talking about the similarities. It was a letter of solidarity from me to African Americans. And I was touching these issues that, look, there are similarities. African Americans were shipped from Africa to become slaves in America. Palestinians were kicked out of their homes. Not the same, but similar. Police officers shoot you and they kill you and they get away with it. Look, we have occupation forces. They do the same here. People don't like it when you go protesting. They don't like it. They call you, if you're violent, they call you barbaric, monkeys, whatever. Any racist comments. If you're not violent, you say, "Oh, this is so disrespectful." Like if you heard about the football player who was kneeling when the national anthem was playing. To them, it was a sign of disrespect to say, "Okay, you're disrespectful now." They don't like it. Here is the same thing. When you fight violently, they call you a terrorist. And when you fight non-violently, they say you're anti-Semite, like what they do with the BDS. They say, these are also terrorists, you're anti-Semites. They want to destroy Israel, whatever. But they say, so when you look at the two issues, if you find these similarities, you create the same connection. And the conclusion I found, for me, when I look at this, it's a struggle of power. The powerful don't like it when the powerless protest. So it doesn't matter what they say, just keep protesting. That was my argument. But that's the thing. The thing is, when we create feature articles or feature writing, depending on your audience, or if it's a general audience, try to create this human connection. Find the similarities and hit them hard. Hit them hard. That's the thing. So what is feature writing? Feature, what is the meaning of feature? To feature is to highlight, basically. When you go to a website, let's say that's the New York Times, a newspaper. You go to the New York Times and you go to the first page. The first thing you see is featured articles, which means highlighted articles, right? So the feature writing is to highlight, the highlighting writing. So you're either highlighting a person, and this person could be the way Pam did it, you're talking about it from third perspective, or you can actually interview him and get quotes. You're either highlighting, or you're highlighting an issue, like what we saw with Ghanam's piece in Inas. She was talking about the suicide in Gaza, and she actually provided analysis. She gave us interviews and she gave us analysis. And in both cases, we saw them answering all the questions. What was happening? Who was it happening to? Why was it happening? Where is it happening? Right? All these questions. A third type. This is not the only type of feature writing. I'm just covering because this is. For now, let's talk about that. Or this is the most essential ones. Or it could be a first-person report. You're talking about something you're experiencing within a group. So you're the one who's doing the talking, not someone else. Okay? We noticed that they break the news format. It's not from the most important to the least important. In the feature writing, you pick your own order. You pick your own formatting because and this allows more freedom of writing, more creativity. It could be a chronological order. It could be something else. It explains and analyzes a person's or events. If you're talking about, and especially if you're talking about an issue, you explain it and you analyze it, or whatever. Like what we saw in the suicide piece. It has depth in the characters. It tells you who are the characters, why did they do this. Gives you more information about them, their family, whatever. So we see a lot of details, unlike the news. The news give us the least details. Just the details that tell us what is the news, basically. And it requires you to research. And actually, I should have made it bigger because this is important. You have to research when you actually write feature writing. You need to know what you're writing about, right? If you're writing about an issue, you chose a specific issue. Let's say the education in Palestine, right? Or in Gaza, let's make it smaller. The education in Gaza, or the higher education in Gaza. High school education, sorry. You want to highlight, for example, this is a big topic, right? There's a lot of things. You can talk about the curriculum, you can talk about teaching methods, you can talk about the teachers themselves. Just the other day, we saw the video of the teacher who was hitting the students. You can talk about that. This is one physical punishment, this is one topic. So if you're talking about physical punishment and you choose to talk about it, you have to do some research. When did it start, this physical punishment? Who does it? Who is it? Who does it to whom? Who's getting punished? And then you have to do interviews. Who would you interview if you're talking about physical punishment? Teachers, students, who else?
Directors of the Ministry of Education.
Exactly. You have to go to the government also. You need to talk to the Ministry of Education. Psychiatrists, how the effects of physical punishment on students? Yes, of course. Mental effects. Counselors from the school themselves, how do they deal with this issue? Very important. Maybe academics who wrote about this. The parents of the students, how do they feel about it when you hear that your child is getting hit? So you have a lot of options, and this is how you do the research. You have to go into these people and ask the important questions. This is what we are going to talk about next class, inshallah. So let's continue. Again, we saw that it humanizes people because it gives you details. It makes you feel their pain and feel what they're doing, what they're going through, or feel their happiness if it's a happy topic. Okay. And at the end of the day, when you finish, it gives you something to think about. You're like, okay, this is interesting. I learned something today, something new. I learned about the life of someone called Anas who goes to catch turkeys in Ramadan. Because people do that. I don't do it. You guys probably don't do it. So it's a new experience you learn about, right? Because what makes us different from one another is the experiences we deal with. And the suicide piece, you know, when you read it, you feel you learn about the people who suffer from mental illness and suffer from the economy in Palestine or Gaza. And it's timeless. There's the characteristic of timelessness. If you published Inas's piece or Pam's piece, the first day of Ramadan or the last day of Ramadan, would it matter? No, because it's within the context. Or Inas's piece, if you read it today. If you read it, it was published in March. If you read it today, and if you read it in March, would there be a difference?
No.
Not much. But the news, if there's an airstrike, if you read it after a week, you're like, this is old news. It happened already. Okay? So for next class or for next lecture meeting, I want you guys to think about a topic to talk about. Choose a specific topic and choose it wisely. Are you going to talk about one person, following him around? And if you're choosing a person, what exactly about the person you are going to talk about? The way he treats his children, his job, his plans for the future, his past, maybe his accomplishments, or maybe it's just one day in his life, like Pam did, whatever you want. But choose wisely. Are you going to talk about an issue, suicide in Gaza, physical punishment, people who run away, you know, who go to the boats, people who want to, or brain drain, you know, the people who with higher education, high grades and higher education, you want to leave the country and work outside, get their PhD and work in that country, right? This is a big issue. Think about it, and then think about the people who you want to interview to do the research. Focus your story on one aspect. So do the research on the why, who, the what, and the why, when, and the where. Ask yourself these questions, and then ask yourself, if you are a reader, why should I care? You have to ask this question the first time, at the beginning of the writing process. Why should I care? Why should people care about this story? Because you might change a lot of things in the story because of that. And remember, you need to humanize. You need to make people feel. It's not just facts. You need to make people feel the story itself. I don't want you to do a lot of research because next class we will be talking about interviewing people. So don't start interviewing people yet. But I want you to pick the topic and I want you to try to build the theme and what is the message you want to give. And go answer these questions, the 5 questions. Okay? So that's it for today, and inshallah we'll meet on Sunday? Sunday. That's from 1 to 3. I wish I talked about interview skills today, because then you would have more time. But oh well, we'll see how it goes. Okay, so we will talk about the interview skills next class, and how to conduct the research. What kind of questions do you want to ask? Which people are you going to ask? And then how to start actually writing your article. Okay? Do you guys have any questions?